Stare at this photo. Look closely. We are looking at one of the most famous and most baffling images of World War II on the American home front. The date is February 25th, 1942. The time is 3:16 a.m. The location is the City of Angels, Los Angeles. In this frame, we see 8 massive 60-inch. They are all converged on a single point over Culver City. At the center of that convergence, there appears to be a white, saucer-shaped object hovering in the sky, and surrounding that object. Those white puffs are not stars. They are the explosions of 3-inch anti-aircraft shells. At the exact moment this photo was taken, Los Angeles was in the grip of total madness. On the ground, millions of civilians woke up in pitch darkness, shivering in basements and hiding under beds, convinced that the Japanese Empire had arrived to bring the nightmare of Pearl Harbor to California. The sky turned into a volcano. Over the next hour, American Air Defense Forces unleashed 1,430 rounds of high-explosive ammunition into the air. That is nearly 10 tons of explosives, detonating over Hollywood, Santa Monica, and Long Beach. Shrapnel rained down like metal hail, smashing through roofs, destroying cars, and wounding innocent civilians. It was a display of maximum firepower, a spectacular defense of the homeland. There was just one problem. When the sun rose over the Pacific hours later, when the smoke finally cleared, there was nothing. No crashed planes. No burning Zeros. No dead pilots. No trace of an invasion force. After firing 1,430 shells, the number of enemy aircraft confirmed destroyed was 0. After the war, declassified archives from the Japanese Imperial Navy revealed a chilling truth. There were no Japanese planes over Los Angeles that night. So, what were they shooting at? Was it a radar phantom? Was it a weather balloon drifting into restricted airspace? Or, as conspiracy theorists have insisted for 80 years, was the object in that photo not from this earth? I am Strange Files of History. Today, in this crossover of Iron Generals and Strange Files, we aren't just telling a ghost story. We are going to use hard military data to deconstruct the flaws of 1940s radar, analyze the mechanical failure of the M1918 anti-aircraft guns, and transport you back to the night when an entire nation suffered a nervous breakdown. Welcome to the Battle of Los Angeles, the insanity of February 25th. We must first strip away our hindsight and place ourselves in the shoes of an American in 1942. It had been exactly 80 days since Pearl Harbor. The psychological defenses of the West Coast had completely collapsed. For Americans living in California, the Japanese military was not a distant enemy fighting on islands thousands of miles away. It was a ghost haunting their doorstep. Rumors spread like a virus. People swore they saw Japanese aircraft carriers hiding in the fog off San Francisco. Others claimed Japanese spies were signaling from the Hollywood Hills with flashlights. Some even believed paratroopers had already infiltrated the farmlands of the Central Valley. Does this sound like mass hysteria? Perhaps. But this fear was not baseless, because just 36 hours before the Battle of Los Angeles, the war actually arrived on American soil. This is a detail often skipped in history books, but it is the key to understanding the entire event. On the night of February 23, 1942, a Japanese Imperial Navy submarine I-17 surfaced silently off the coast of Elwood, near Santa Barbara. The submarine's commander was Lieutenant Commander Kozo Nishino. His target was not a warship, but the Elwood oil field. Nishino ordered the gun crew to the deck and operate the 140mm 5.5-inch deck gun. Over the next 20 minutes, the I-17 fired more than a dozen shells at the American mainland. The actual damage was negligible. A wooden dock was damaged, and a pump house was destroyed. Total losses were estimated at less than $500. One shell even landed in a field without exploding. But the psychological trauma, it was equivalent to an atomic bomb. This was the first time since the War of 1812 that a foreign power had directly shelled the American mainland. The headlines of major newspapers proclaimed, "Submarine bombards the South." The message was clear and terrifying. "We're here. You're not safe." This attack completely shattered the nerves of the U.S. military command. The entire Western Air Defense Command went on high alert. Every radar operator stared intently at their screens until their eyes ached. interpreting every malfunction as a bomber formation. Every anti-aircraft gunner stood guard at their gun positions, fingers on the triggers. They were convinced that the I-17 was just a reconnaissance plane, and the main invading force was about to arrive. The powder keg was already full of fuel. Only a spark was needed to ignite it. February 25th, 1942, 1:44 a.m. On the radar screens of the Los Angeles Air Defense Network, the first anomaly appeared. At the time, the U.S. Army relied on the SCR-268 radar. By modern standards, this was a primitive machine. It didn't provide clear altitude, speed, or IFF identification friend or foe codes like modern digital radar. On the oscilloscope of An-268 Seychelles rupees, a target was just a bouncing spike in the wave. The operator had to use intuition to decide. Is that spike a bomber? A flock of seagulls? Or a cloud holding a static charge? That morning, operators reported an unidentified target 120 miles off the coast. It vanished. But at 2:15 a.m., it reappeared, and this time it was closing in fast on the coastline. This was the spark. The controller of the Los Angeles Air Defense did not hesitate. In a night where the rule was shoot first, ask questions later, he issued the fateful order. Air raid warning red. What did red mean? It meant that within minutes, a modern metropolis of millions had to vanish. Power companies cut the master switches for streetlights. Radio stations were ordered off the air instantly to prevent enemy bombers from using their signals for navigation. Police and air raid wardens rushed through the streets, banging on doors, screaming, "Lights out." Turn those lights out. The city plunged into total, suffocating darkness. But in the dark, the human mind begins to play tricks. When your eyes adjust to the black, you start to see things that aren't there. Reports began flooding into the command center. 2:25 civilians report flares over Long Beach. 2:35 reports of red lights flying in formation. 2:45 a Coast Artillery colonel in Santa Monica reports seeing a V formation of 25 planes through his binoculars. Panic was growing exponentially, but up until this moment, not a single shot had been fired. The Army was still waiting for visual confirmation until 3:16 a.m. At a gun battery in Santa Monica, a nervous gunner saw a thoughty sour red object drifting across the sky. Some said it was a balloon. Some said it was a plane's tail light. Whatever it was, the gunner pulled the lanyard. Boom! The first 3-inch shell screamed into the night. That single shot was like striking a match in a room full of gasoline. Instantly, the entire Los Angeles defense network from the Hollywood Hills to San Pedro assumed the battle had begun. They didn't wait for orders. They didn't confirm targets. They just opened fire at wherever the searchlights were pointing. The Battle of Los Angeles had begun. Once the firing started, chaos grew geometrically. Let's analyze this from an IN general's tactical perspective. The U.S. Air Defense Forces fell into a deadly trap known as self-sustaining target fixation. Here's how it works. First, the searchlights illuminate the sky. Then, the first volley of shells explodes. When a 3-inch high-explosive shell detonates, it creates a dense puff of black smoke. Under the blinding glare of the searchlights, these smoke puffs take on a solid, grayish-white appearance. To a gunner on the ground pumped full of adrenaline and standing miles away, that illuminated smoke looks exactly like a damaged aircraft or a strange saucer. So, they aim at the smoke and fire again. More explosions. More smoke. The new smoke looks like more enemy planes. So they fire even faster. It was a perfect, closed loop. The U.S. Army was literally attacking its own smoke. The famous war correspondent Ernie Pyle, who witnessed the event, later wrote, "The shells burst in the sky like giant cauliflower. Some spots looked like planes, some like balloons. No one knew what they were shooting at, but everyone was shooting. For 1 hour, the night was as bright as day. But this fireworks show came with a price. Newtonian physics dictates, what goes up must come down. Those 1,430 shells did not all vaporize. Some shells had faulty fuses and fell back to Earth as live duds, but most returned as jagged, razor-sharp shrapnel. In Long Beach, a woman watching from her garden had her fence sheared off by falling steel. In Santa Monica, a Ford coupe was found with a hole punched straight through its engine block by an unexploded shell. This battle had no enemy, but it had real casualties. 5 civilians died that night. 3 were killed in car accidents caused by the blackout confusion. 2 died of heart attacks induced by the sheer terror of the shelling. These people were not killed by Japanese bombs. They were killed by fear. Now, let's answer the hard technical question. Why did 1,430 shells fail to bring down a single object, even if it was just a balloon? Statistically, with that much lead in the air, something should have been hit. The answer lies in the fuze technology of 1942. The weapon of choice was the 3-inch anti-aircraft gun, M1918. It was a solid weapon, but its ammunition used mechanical time fuses. This was before the invention of the proximity fuse, which uses radar to detect when it's near a target. With a mechanical fuse, the gunner has to physically turn a ring on the nose of the shell before loading it, setting a timer. If you set it for 10 seconds, the shell explodes after 10 seconds of flight. This requires a precise calculation of the target's altitude. That night, most gunners were setting their fuses for 12,000 to 18,000 feet. Why? Because that's where the searchlight beams were crossing. But what if the object, say, a weather balloon, was actually floating at 8,000 feet? The shells would fly right past it and explode thousands of feet above. If the target was a smoke cloud at 20,000 feet, the shells would explode below it. This explains why the UFO in the famous photo looks invincible. The army was creating a ring of fire around it, but because of bad math and bad nerves, they couldn't touch the center. And what about the radar? Why did it track a target in the first place? Meteorologists later analyzed that on the night of February 24th to 25th, the Los Angeles coast experienced a strong temperature inversion. This happens when a layer of warm air sits on top of a layer of cold air near the ocean surface. To a radar wave, this atmospheric boundary acts like a mirror. The radar beam hits the inversion layer, bounces back to the ground, and then bounces back to the receiver. On this screen, this creates ghost echoes. These echoes can appear to move, hover, or accelerate instantly. To an inexperienced operator, a ghost echo looks exactly like a squadron of bombers. The army wasn't fighting aliens, they were fighting the weather. Finally, we must address the elephant in the room of photo. For 80 years, UFO enthusiasts have held this image up as the Holy Grail. It was even used as the poster for the movie Battle, Los Angeles. It certainly looks convincing. A massive, lens-shaped craft hovering in the beams, shrugging off artillery fire. But historians and photoanalysts have revealed a disappointing truth. The photo was painted. In the 1940s, newspaper printing technology was poor. To make black and white photos, pop on cheap newsprint, photo editors routinely used a technique called retouching. They would use white paint to sharpen light beams and black ink to deepen shadows directly on the negative. Modern analysis shows that the sharp edges of the saucer were largely drawn in by an editor to emphasize the convergence point of the light. If we look at the unretouched original negative, the UFO becomes much blurrier. It looks less like a spaceship and more like an irregular cloud of illuminated gas. This supports the official conclusion released by the government after the war. The trigger for the firing was likely a 100-gram meteorological balloon. It was released over Hollywood at 1 a.m. The wind carried it over Culver City right as nerves were snapping. Someone saw it. Someone fired. And then panic took the wheel. The next morning, Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox held a press conference in Washington and bluntly stated it was a false alarm. But Secretary of War Henry Stimson disagreed, insisting that commercial planes might have been used by the enemy to cause panic. This confusion between the Army and Navy only deepened the public mystery. The Battle of Los Angeles did not change the course of World War II. It had no strategic value, but it remains a profound parable about human nature. It demonstrates how fragile rationality becomes when a society is gripped by fear. When you arm thousands of men, put them on high alert, and tell them the monster is coming, they will find a monster, even if they have to invent one out of smoke, shadows, and balloons. Whether it was a radar ghost, a weather balloon, or something stranger. The Battle of Los Angeles proved one thing. The most dangerous weapon in a war is not the artillery shell. It is human fear. What do you think really happened that night? Do you believe the weather balloon theory? Or is the government hiding something about what was caught in those search? Let me know your theory in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring the forgotten, strange battles of history, verify your clearance by hitting that subscribe button. Thank you for watching. To discover more untold stories of World War II, please click the video on your screen. See you next time.